Sinners might be one of the most remarkable films of the year.
You get back inside.
Anyone who knows me knows that it would be a little bit surprising for me to have a $90 million budget Warner Bros. Picture as my number one film of the year, but we're 4 months into 2025, and Sinners is probably my favorite so far. I don't think that I can overstate what an achievement in direction and the overall vision this is for Ryan Coogler. For folks who don't know, I imagine that most of you do. Sinners follows two brothers, both played by Michael B. Jordan, as they return home from Chicago with a load of cash and a plan to make some money together and with their younger cousin. But of course, they run into their old lovers, and oh, there's vampires. Coogler has somehow managed to make a film that is part vampire horror, part period piece, part action shoot 'em up, part character drama, part musical. It really has a little bit of everything, and against the odds, it just works. It's one of those projects that requires a pretty substantial buy-in from the audience, but Coogler really earns it. There were almost no moments in the film that I was taken out of. I fully bought into the fact that I was watching a vampire horror period musical, and I really loved it. And I'm not the only one, apparently, who has loved it. Sinners is the highest grossing original film since Jordan Peele's Us in 2019, which in itself is an achievement. And it's one of those rare projects that has enough for us pretentious film folks while also enough for people who just want a super fun action flick or a tense genre piece. It bridges the gaps between otherwise somewhat distinct movie-going groups, and what is also super cool about everything here is the deal that Coogler ended up negotiating with Warner Bros. And without going into a ton of detail, he was basically able to secure full ownership of Sinners after 25 years, which is pretty unheard of with these big production studios. And on top of this, he held the rights to Final Cut approval. Even before Warner Brothers was on board, Coogler knew that he wanted Michael B. Jordan as the star, which is probably not very surprising considering that Jordan has been in literally every single one of Coogler's features, starting back with Fruitvale Station. However, Sinners does mark the first time that Coogler has written an original screenplay himself, and he has called this his first truly original film, and it is very original. He drew on some of his own family lore, including ghost tales from his uncle and stories from his grandfather's own sharecropping life. The film is very much rooted in its music, which is, of course, intentional. And while Coogler was writing the script, he really dove headfirst into 30s and 40s blues music. And I will talk more about the music in a second, but what's interesting is how we see the impact of music on the actual structure of the film. So each theme and genre forms a verse. We have sharecropping and vampires and different music and dance, which leads to this tremendous chorus at the midpoint of the film, which, in my humble opinion, is the greatest scene of the year. I'm not entirely sure what to even say about that scene. You will know the scene that I'm talking about if you've already seen it, and you will certainly recognize it when you are in it if you haven't watched it yet. Without going into any spoilers, it's basically a roughly 4-minute scene in an old juke joint with a character named Sammy, the younger cousin of Michael B. Jordan's characters, as he plays the blues. The scene starts off pretty grounded, but then quickly moves into something a lot more surreal. We move with the camera as it goes up to the roof of the juke joint as the building lights up in flames, and then we move back down into the building and move through the entirety of the space. And we see the ancestors of everyone in the room, and we also see the people who have yet to come. We see traditional African dance, we see hip hop, we see the ancestors of the only non black folks in the room, Bo and Grace, and it feels like this really beautiful hallucination, and it illustrates the kind of transcendental power of music and dance and art and culture and community. It was apparently filmed in 3 parts, and each of them took roughly half a day each to film. As you watch it, you can kind of see how this might be the case. It would require pretty incredible and precise blocking and choreography, and it does feel very magical in the end result. At this point, I should probably give some specific props to the DP, the cinematographer, Autumn Arkapaw, who worked with Coogler back on Black Panther 2. She shot this on IMAX film, and definitely try to see it in IMAX if you can. She chose to shoot with fairly open apertures, which basically means that we get a very shallow depth of field in a lot of these scenes, and to me that kind of serves to enhance the empathy that we feel with individual characters as we find ourselves locked onto one person at a time for much of Sinners, and that means that we kind of have to really listen to what they're saying. And she also chose to use these absolutely gorgeous anamorphic lenses in scenes that are a little bit more mystical or otherworldly, and we get these swirls of color surrounding our subjects, again kind of bridging the gap between the real and the unreal. And I could go on and on about the cinematography here, but long story short, Sinners is a beautiful film. I mentioned earlier how music is the backbone of the film, and that really is the case. Göransson composed the score, and he's worked with Coogler in the past, and he was able to draw on a personal lifetime of love for the blues. And interestingly, they decided to include a number of live takes on set instead of overdubbing in post, and this kind of helps maintain that soul of the music, the rawness, the richness that we hear. Outside of the Delta blues, we get some other music. We get some Irish folk songs and step dances, and a little bit of an Easter egg. Don't be those people who leave the theater right when the credits start rolling, because we get some brilliant electric guitar and a full bonus scene after these initial credits finish. Overall, the music really shows its power in building community and sharing stories, and I got completely lost in it. Before I wrap things up, I definitely do need to talk about Michael B. Jordan. As I mentioned briefly earlier, he plays 2 characters here, twin brothers, Elijah and Elias Moore. And I would say that this is probably the most he's been asked to do on screen. One twin is a little bit more brooding and haunted, and the other is, I would say, more confident and charismatic. And as you watch closely, you can start picking up on the unique postures and vocal cadence that he develops for each character. And believe it or not, a lot of what we see on screen was actually captured in camera, so not just using visual effects. So scenes that were shot with a locked off tripod, there were quite a few of them actually, had Jordan performing both roles, and then they would literally splice the film halves together. Again, this was shot on IMAX film. For some more complex scenes, they used what's called a halo rig, where basically they digitally placed Michael B. Jordan's head on a body double's body, so they would study his face and be able to transpose it. At the end of the day, Sinners wasn't really on my must-watch list heading into this year, but it should definitely be on yours if you haven't seen it yet. It's a pretty remarkable film that showcases the impact of our ancestors and the power of music, all while being a super tense vampire flick with some of the best action sequences of the year. Coogler has defied the odds here, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, do all those things, please. It's helpful. It makes me feel good as a human being. Thank you. Watch the next one.